Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series reading The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. Without further ado, returning to The Invisible Man as read by Lord Naren White. After Mrs. Hall had left the room, he remained standing in front of the fire, glaring, so Mr. Henfrey puts it, at the clock mending. Mr. Henfrey not only took off the hands of the clock and the face, but he extracted the works, and he tried to work in as slow and quiet and unassuming a manner as possible. He worked with the lamp close to him, and the green shade threw a brilliant light upon his hands and upon the frame and wheels, and left the rest of the room shadowy. When he looked up, colored patches swam in his eyes, being constitutionally of a curious nature. He had removed the works, a quite unnecessary proceeding, with the idea of delaying his departure and perhaps falling into conversation with the stranger. But the stranger stood there, perfectly silent and still, so still it got on Henfrey's nerves. He felt alone in the room and looked up, and there, gray and dim, was the bandaged head and huge blue lenses staring fixedly, with a mist of green spots drifting in front of them. It was so uncanny to Henfrey that for a minute they remained staring blankly at one another. Then Henfrey looked down again. Very uncomfortable position. One would like to say something. Should he remark that the weather was very cold for the time of year? He looked up as if to take aim with that introductory shot. "The weather," he began. "Why don't you finish and go?" said the rigid figure, evidently in a state of painfully suppressed rage. "All you've got to do is fix the hour hand on its axle. You're simply humbugging." "Certainly, sir. One more minute. I overlooked." And Mr. Humphrey went and finished. But he went feeling excessively annoyed. "Damn it," said Mr. Humphrey to himself, trudging down the village through the thawing snow. "A man must do a clock at times, surely." And again, "Can't a man look at you? Ugly!" And yet again, "Seemingly not. If the police was wanting you, you couldn't be more wropped and bandaged." At Gleason's corner he saw Hall, who had recently married the stranger's hostess at the Coach and Horses, and who now drove the Ipping conveyance, when occasional people required it, to Sidderbridge Junction. Coming towards him on his return from that place, Hall had evidently been stopping a bit at Sidderbridge, to judge by his driving. "'Ow do, Teddy?" he said, passing. "You got a rum on up home?" said Teddy. Hall very sociably pulled up. "What's that?" he asked. "Rum-looking customer stopping at the Coach and Horses," said Teddy. "My sakes!" And he proceeded to give Hall a vivid description of his grotesque guest. "Looks a bit like a disguise, don't it? I'd like to see a man's face if I had him stopping in my place," said Henfrey. "But women are that trustful where strangers are concerned. He's took your rooms, and he ain't even given a name, Hall." "You don't say so," said Hall, who was a man of sluggish apprehension. "Yes," said Teddy. "By the week, whatever he is, you can't get rid of him under the week. And he's got a lot of luggage coming tomorrow, so he says. Let's hope it won't be stones and boxes, Hall." He told Hall how his Aunt Hastings had been swindled by a stranger with empty portmanteau. Altogether, he left Hall vaguely suspicious. "Get up, old girl," said Hall. "I suppose I must see about this." Teddy trudged on his way with his mind considerably relieved. Instead of seeing about it, however, Hall on his return was severely rated by his wife on the length of time he had spent in Sidderbridge, and his mild inquiries were simply answered snappishly in a manner not to the point. But the seed of suspicion Teddy had sown germinated in the mind of Mr. Hall, in spite of these discouragements. "You don't win everything. You women don't know everything." "You women don't know everything," said Mr. Hall, resolved to ascertain more about the personality of his guest at the earliest possible opportunity. and after the stranger had gone to bed, which he did about 9:30, Mr. Hall went aggressively into the parlor and looked very hard at his wife's furniture, just to show that the stranger wasn't master there, and scrutinized closely and contemptuously a sheet of mathematical computations the stranger had left. When retiring for the night, he instructed Mrs. Hall to look very closely at the stranger's luggage when it came next day. You mind your own business, Hall, said Mrs. Hall, and I'll mind mine. She was all the more inclined to snap at Hall because the stranger was undoubtedly an unusually strange sort of stranger, and she was by no means assured about him in her own mind. In the middle of the night she woke up dreaming of huge white heads like turnips that came trailing after her at the end of interminable necks, and with vast black eyes. But, being a sensible woman, she subdued her terrors and turned over and went to sleep again. Chapter 3. The 1,001 Bottles. So it was that on the 29th day of February, at the beginning of the thaw, the singular person fell out of infinity into Ipping village. Next day his luggage arrived through the slush, and very remarkable luggage it was. There were a couple of trunks indeed, such as a rational man might need, but in addition there were a box of books, big, fat books, of which some were just in an incomprehensible handwriting, and a dozen or more crates, boxes, and cases, containing objects packed in straw, and it seemed to Hall tugging with a casual curiosity at the straw, glass bottles. The stranger, muffled in hat, coat, gloves, and wrapper, came out impatiently to meet Fearenside's cart, while Hall was having a word or so gossip preparatory to helping bring them in. Out he came, not noticing Fearenside's dog, who was sniffing in a dilettante spirit at Hall's legs. "Come along with those boxes," he said. "I've been waiting long enough." And he came down the steps toward the tail of the cart, as if to lay hands on the smaller crate. No sooner had Fearenside's dog caught sight of him, however, than it began to bristle and growl savagely. And when he rushed down the steps, it gave an undecided hop and then sprang straight at his hand. "Whup!" cried Hall, jumping back, for he was no hero with dogs, and Fearenside howled, "Lie down!" and snatched his whip. They saw the dog's teeth had slipped the hand, heard a kick, saw the dog execute a flanking jump and get home on the stranger's leg, and heard the rip of his trouser ring. Then the finer end of Fearenside's whip reached the property, and the dog, yelping with dismay, retreated under the wheels of the wagon. It was all the business of a swift half-minute. No one spoke, every one shouted. The stranger glanced swiftly at his torn glove and at his leg, made as if he would stoop to the latter, then turned and rushed swiftly up the steps into the inn. They heard him go headlong across the passage and up the uncarpeted stairs to his bedroom. "You brute, you!" said Fearenside, climbing off the wagon, with his whip in his hand, while the dog watched him through the wheel. "Come here," said Fearenside. "You'd better." Hall had stood gaping. "He was bit," said Hall. "I'd better go and see to him." And he trotted off the stranger. He met Mrs. Hall in the passage. "Carrier's drag," he said. "Bitten." He went straight upstairs, and the stranger's door being ajar, he pushed it open, and was entering without any ceremony, being of a naturally sympathetic turn of mind. The blind was down and the room dim. He caught a glimpse of a most singular thing, what seemed a handless arm waving toward him, and a face of 3 indeterminate spots on white, very like the face of a pale pansy. Then he was struck violently in the chest, hurled back, and the door slammed in his face and locked. It was so rapid that it gave him no time to observe. A waving of indecipherable shapes, a blow and a concussion. There he stood on the dark little landing, wondering what it might be that he had seen. A couple of minutes after, he rejoined the little group that had formed outside the coaches and horses. There was Fearenside telling about it all over again for the second time. There was Mrs. Hall saying his dog didn't have no business to bite her guests. There was Huckster, the general dealer from over the road, interrogative, and Sandy Wadgers from the forge, judicial, besides women and children, all of them saying fatuities. Would him let him bite me, I knows. 'Twas right to have such darks. What he bite him for, then? And so forth. Mr. Hall, staring at them from the steps and listening, found it incredible that he had seen anything so very remarkable happen upstairs. Besides, his vocabulary was altogether too limited to express his impressions. We'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.